Okay, so I want to do a couple more factoring by grouping problems before I move on to some different type of factoring. So I want to do one more example of this. Okay, so factoring by grouping, again, what we want to do is group the first two, group the last two, find factors that go into the first two here. So obviously we have an 8, because we both have 8's common. We have an x, so that's what I'm going to take out. So I'm going to take out an 8x. And I'm going to be left with y minus 8x divided by 8x is 1. Bring down that plus. Now I'm going to come in here and say, okay, what am I taking out of here? Well, I can take out a 7. And I'm left with this one. It turns out wasn't working out right. So let's start all over. Sorry about that. I was looking at it thinking, why isn't this working? So I misread the problem. So it's 8xy minus 8z plus 7z minus 7y. Now we'll factor by grouping here. So here I could take an 8x out. I'm with y minus z. Here I can take out a plus and a 7. And I'm left with z minus y. Alright, now these two are, this is a perfect example where these two don't match up. Alright, because this is a y minus z, this is a z minus y. Although they're pretty darn close. Okay, so what we could do is, instead of making this a positive 7, so we would make this a negative 7, and that would make this a negative and make this a positive, and now they would fit together. Okay, I don't think you're going to have any like that, but it's just another example of factoring by grouping. Okay, so yesterday, it was yesterday for me, back up here, I talked about the different types of factoring. That we're taking something out was what we did. Grouping was what I just showed you. And now I'm going to spend the rest of the 2 times talking about trinomials. So I'm going to do this. So let's go factoring trinomials. So when we're factoring trinomials, there's actually 2 different types. Alright, so the first type we're going to look at are just straightforward x squared plus 6x plus 8. I'm going to start with one that looks like this. Okay, so we've seen a lot of these because we've done a lot of foiling. And remember, factoring is just like unfoiling. Alright, so what we want to try to do then is write the foiling parts, the ones that we used to foil. So we're going to go from this to unfoiling, so we get it into a parenthesis situation like this and like this. Okay, that's my objective. Well, let's review foiling for a second. So I want to change colors here to a green. Talk a little bit about foiling. Alright, so let's say that we have x plus 3 and x plus 5. Alright, now we know that when we FOIL, we're going to take these first two and multiply them. That's where the x squared comes from. Alright, and then I also know that I'm going to do this, and those two, I'm just going to look at this way for now, form that number. Alright, so the 5 and the 3 add up to that 8. Alright, so that's where that's where the 8 comes from. All right, then to finish this off, 3 plus 5 is 15, or 3 times 5 is 15. All right, so when I think about multiplying, foiling two binomials, okay, an x plus and an x plus, and I'm foiling, this middle number right here, okay, comes from the addition of these two in this case. This number comes from these same two numbers, but they're being multiplied to get to that number. So I'm going to use that idea when I start to factor. So when I come back up to this guy, and I have x squared plus 6x plus 8, and I want to factor that, I'm going to take a look at this number here. And I'm going to write down all the factors of that number. So 1 and 8, 2 and 4, and that's all I got. Now, obviously, we know that I can probably take the number 3 and multiply it by something to get 8. But I want my numbers to be nice whole numbers or integer numbers, okay, no decimals. If I can't get away from that, I want it to be nice. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a plus here because this is a plus. So that tells me that these two factors have to add up to that 6. All right, so then I know that whatever two I pick here, they got to add to 6. So obviously, those are the ones that are going to add to 6. So now I can finish this. I know this is going to be an x, and I know this is going to be an x, simply because x times x gives us the x squared that we're looking for there. These two numbers, this is going to be 2 and this is going to be a 4. All right, and that's because 2 times 4 gives me the 8 I'm looking for. I need everything to be pluses here because 2 times 4 plus plus gives me a plus, and 2 plus 4 gives me a plus. So everything has to be positive. So when I multiply it, I get to 8, and when I add them, I get to 6. Just to show you, here we go. FOIL, x squared plus 2x plus 4x plus 8. X squared plus 6x plus 8. Exactly what I ended up with. So you see, factoring trinomials like this is really unfoiling. So let's try some more. Sorry, I got a little interrupted there. So x squared minus 3x. And this time I'm going to put a minus 10 there. Okay. So this one's a little bit different. So each one here we're going to show is going to be a little different. This time we have a minus here and a minus here. But I'm still going to use the same strategy, except I'm going to put a negative 10 there. So now I'm going to write out factors of 10. And again, I can have more, but I want to keep my numbers nice. And instead of adding this time, because this is a minus, I want to subtract to that 3. Okay? So, obviously, there's my numbers, because 5 minus 2 gives me 3. So, I'm ready to factor. X and x are going to go there, because x times x is x squared. 2 and 5 go there and there. Now some of you might ask me, does it matter whether I write the 2 or the 5? And it really doesn't, because what next matters is the signs we're going to put on there. Okay, so where you put the 2 and the 5 really don't matter. It's how you arrange the signs. So, because of the idea that a positive times a negative is a negative, and a negative times a positive is a negative, we're going to use that fact on here. One of these has to be positive, and one of these has to be negative in order for me to get the negative 10 that I need. Right, because I have a negative there too. So, if I make the 5 negative and the 2 positive, and I look at this, I get a negative 5x plus 2x. And negative 5x plus 2x is negative 3x, which is what I'm searching for. Okay, so that means that my answer is exactly what I guessed it to be. Okay. Now, let's take a look at another one just like that, and then we can go back and look at some patterns and some things that are going to merge in here. So let's go with one like this. Okay, so now I have a 30. That's negative. And I need factors. And I'm really not even writing down whether they're positive or negative. Now I'm just writing down factors. Now when I get to 5 and 6, I know I could probably put 10 and 3 here, but I've already got 3 and 10. And since it doesn't matter the order I write them in, I've already got them taken care of, so I don't need to rewrite them. But what I do need to figure out is how many of them are going to subtract to 1, because I have 1x there. Well, that's easy to find. So, I break down my parentheses. I know I'm going to have an x and an x. I know I'm going to have a 5 and a 6. The question is, because it's negative, and because a negative times a positive gives us a negative, and that's what these need to be, I got to figure out which one's positive and which one's negative. So if I look at this, and I look at this, okay, I got a 5x and a 6x. I want the answer to be negative. So hopefully you can see that that 6 has got to be negative, and that 5 has got to be positive. Why? Because that gives me a negative 6x and a positive 5x, which gives me a negative 1x, which is what I was looking for. Let's go with one more. Okay, this time I have x squared plus 3x minus 18. So I'm going to take 18 negative. Put down my factors. Okay, so now I need to come up with the answer. So I know I'm going to have a parenthesis, x, x. I need my factors. It's a negative 18, but I need them to come up to a 3. Even though this is a plus, they still got to subtract to 18 because it's a negative. Okay, so I know that I have to have a negative and I have to have a positive. Well, the only ones that subtract to 3 are these two. So I put 3 and 6 there, and this time I got to figure out, okay, which one's going to be positive, which one's going to be negative. I got to get a positive 3x. Negative 3x, positive 6x. So there's my answer. Now, let's come back and take a look at these. Notice that in this case, the 5 is the largest of the two numbers. 5 is larger than 2. And it took on that negative sign. Notice here that 6 and 5, 6 is the largest, and it took on that negative sign. Here, 6 is the largest, and it took on the positive sign. So, let's see. So let's try that one. Notice how every time I always write that, transfer that over when it's negative or positive. I think I got them all. So now, I'm ready. Okay, so I got to find numbers. Again, 32. Going to give me a 4. There's our numbers. So I'll put 8 down, 4 down. We just talked about how the largest number of these two is always going to take on that sign. And we'll check that out. Okay, so I think we've taken care of that case. So we looked at when this last number was positive, and we looked at when that last number there was negative and the different situations there. Let's take a look at this one. So here's a situation where this last number here is positive, but the number that is in the middle there is negative. So we still got to add up. It's just that they're going to add up to a 7, and they got to be negative. So I'm going to write my factors of 12. And then I'm going to drop my parentheses down. And I'm going to say which one of these add up to 12, or add up to 7. I'm going to put those in there. Now, because it's a positive, in this case we know that a positive times a positive is positive, but also a negative times a negative is a positive. So here, both of these have to be negative in order to make this work. Again, a negative times a negative gives us a positive 12, but when we do this guy, we get our negative 4 minus 3, negative 7. So you have to be a little bit aware of what this number, or what this sign right here represents, okay? And the fact that that's going to tell you whether your signs here are both negative, both positive, or negative or positive. All right, so you look at that, and then you finish by looking at that. All right, so let's just try some of these random ones. Okay, here we go. So I have a negative 50, put a minus there, write my factors. Drop down my parentheses. And say, okay, what numbers do I need here? I need a 5. When I subtract, there's my answer. One of them has to be negative, one of them has to be positive. We know that we have a negative 5x. We also know that the 10 is going to be the largest number. So there we go. The largest number is going to take on that sign. Plus 5 minus 10 going to give me negative 5. Let's go with oops. What am I doing here? Hold on. There we go. Lost my train of thought there. Okay, plus 20. Alright, so I have the x and x there. It's a plus 20. I got to add a 12. I only got 2 answers. Plus and plus, 20, 12 when you add them. I don't know if I did one like this yet. I did. Sorry. Oh, let's try one like that. So 1 and 7 are the only factors I have. This is a pretty easy one. X and x, 7 and 1. Again, because it's 7, one of them's going to be positive. Largest sign, largest number takes on that sign. There we go. So there was some good stuff on trinomials, quite a few examples. You should be able to use those kind of as a building block for, there's really not much in the rest of that that's going to mess you up. Oh, well, let's do this one. Okay, so let's say we have one like this. Now, we don't want to get too tied up in the y's, okay, because it's all going to turn out anyway if we just continue to do the same thing. So I'm going to put 15 there. I don't care about the y. Not interested in it. It's positive 15. I need to write the factors down. They got to add up to 8. Again, don't worry about the x, y's. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Parentheses, 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 parentheses. I know I'm going to have an x here, and I know I'm going to have an x there. Alright. 3, 5. Now, in this case, this is a plus, so they're going to be plus. But here's the sign I got to look at. Minus. So in this case, this is going to be a minus. This is going to be a minus. Here I have a y squared, so I got to drop y's in there like that, just like I have my x's, and that all works out. Okay. If you don't believe, we'll FOIL it. There's your x squared. There's your negative 3yx. There's your negative 5yx. And your plus 15y squared. Okay? All works out. So those are the trinomials. I'm going to say this one is 6.2. And then do another one for 6.3.